What is your My House is Haunted story? When I was little, I had a loft bed with a desk underneath. I've always been a pretty heavy sleeper. I could fall asleep at a concert, so it was strange when I began waking up at 3 in the morning every morning. What was even more strange were the noises coming from the attic. Shuffling, knocking, boxes moving. My 9-year-old brain rationalized it as an animal or bird that had gotten in. After a few weeks of shit sleep, I decided to knock back on my ceiling, shave in a haircut pattern because I was bored and hadn't interacted with whatever was in the attic. I waited in silence for a few minutes until I was about to fall back asleep, and then I heard it. From the ceiling, a foot from my face. It knocked back the pattern. Every night when I woke up, I'd knock and sometimes get a response. It gradually stopped over the years, but I still wake up at 3 a.m. every night. It's weird, but it only happens in my room. I sleep fine in hotels and other houses. 13 years later, and I've just been getting weird vibes around my house. I feel like I'm being watched. I sometimes hear someone saying my name, most notably before bed, and whenever said, it is very close to my ear. I can feel their breath as they whisper, and it freaks me out so much that it takes hours to get back to sleep. The shuffling in the attic also started up again, but I don't want to knock back anymore. There's a lot of weird shit that happens. Things get moved. My dogs and cat stare at the same blank spot, but these are just what's been currently happening. I just don't know what to do anymore. A pastor died of a heart attack in the house I grew up in before we owned it. When I was a baby, I was sick with croup. Apparently, in the night, I was having trouble breathing and was beginning to suffocate. The ceiling light fixture in my nursery fell out of the ceiling and smashed on the floor, waking my parents, who found me choking. Parents are absolutely convinced the pastor's ghost had intervened and saved my life. My childhood home was definitely haunted. I have a drawing potentially made by a ghost. I could feel it when there's a presence somewhere. There's a palpable sense of being watched. There's a tension and paranoia in the air that lingers and can even simmer into full-blown terror. It makes you feel very vulnerable. When I was a young child, I remember seeing glowing red eyes hanging in the air in my desk living room. I thought our house had werewolves or vampires. There was a phase in 3rd grade when glowing orbs would hang out in my room for several minutes at a time, which I interpreted as aliens. My child mind was trying to make sense of things, but I definitely had a fear of the dark, specifically in our house. Most places were fine in the dark, but in our house, I always felt like I was being watched by something with malicious or, at best, neutral intentions. Paranormal things ramped up for me in high school, but to remain chronological, I had a cousin stay at our house one summer while most of us were on vacation between my 7th and 8th grades. My cousin Billy was helping my dad with various projects. One night, my cousin was going to bed in one bedroom, later dubbed the spooky room. Outside in the dark, he saw a figure leave our garage and entire our house. My dad, right? Billy, help me. My cousin heard my father shouting. Billy rushed to check on my father. My father had been sleeping and was irritated by Billy's presence. Billy went back to bed, only to hear it again. Billy, help. Again, cousin Billy rushed to check on my father, who was fine and confused by Billy's urgency. Billy slept on the couch that night. I didn't learn about this until years later. A couple years later, my brother moves away to college, and I move into his old bedroom, the spooky room. It's my freshman year of high school. I was always particularly creeped out by this room, but hey, new changes are often intimidating. One morning, I wake up to see a skull perfectly drawn in the dust on the window across from where my head lies when I sleep. This was the layer of dust facing the inside of the room, not the outside. No one had access to the room except me and my parents, who were not pranksters by any means. I show my room and wipe it away. A couple weeks later, I'm studying in that bedroom. It's night, and the lights are on, so the windows turn into mirrors. I look up from my bed toward that skull window, and I see in the reflection a white silhouette standing behind me. I hold my gaze for maybe 10 seconds, just trying to grasp what I'm looking at. I eventually turn my head around and see nothing. I look back at the window and see nothing in the reflection. I sleep on the couch for the next few nights. A couple more weeks later, I'm lying in bed, listening to a late-night radio show. Lights are off. Looking through that same skull window, I see a similar white silhouette outside stride past my window. I sleep on the couch for several more nights. Over the course of weeks, I see more things drawn on dust of the windows. Generally, it's scribbles and shapes. I'm scared they might be some sort of curse or something, so I wipe them away. Out of curiosity, I put a sticky note on the window that says, "Please write below." Several days later, a perfect circle appears around the note as if someone had put the base of a paint can up against the surface. This was like the finger drawings I'd seen earlier, but one drawing did really stand out. I decided to recreate it in MS Paint before I wiped it away. Over the years, I've shared this with friends and colleagues, and they mostly come to the same conclusion as I did before. I tell them my interpretation. But yeah, for the majority of high school, I slept with the light on. I avoided that side of the house like the plague, little things here and there, but nothing huge, until it's senior year of high school. I'm in the living room with my mother watching TV, and the clothes dryer finishes. This dryer is directly down the hallway from the spooky room. I suck it up and head over to empty the machine, getting my usual feeling of immense dread and paranoia as I enter that side of the house. I bend over and start unloading the laundry, and my mind goes blank, and I lose control over my motor functions. My arms go limp, and beyond my control, my body stands up, and I hear a masculine voice take a deep breath and hiss in my ear. I immediately regain control of my body, and I GTFO. Around that time period, my aunt comes to stay with us for a month or two. She has no idea what I've experienced there, but literally on her first day there, the bathroom door slams hard on her, and she immediately has us smudge the house to ward off whatever's there. I've experienced other paranormal things elsewhere, and I've had a couple of weird experiences where I think my dead relative warned me about a couple imminent death in the family. My house is super haunted, but it's too many little instances to put in one story. I guess I'll just go with the most recent one. A few nights ago, I heard running upstairs. Despite being home alone, I thought it was my cat, but then he came downstairs and the running continued. I was a little spooked, but it's not the worst thing that's happened in this house. The running lasted for quite a while, plus a few knocks. The next morning, I was cleaning upstairs in that room, and my cat crawled into a box of fabrics. I thought he was being cute, so I said, "Aw," and started to pull out my phone to take a picture. While I was still reaching for my phone, I heard a mocking "Aw" right behind me. I completely froze and just let myself process it for a few seconds before checking the room. Obviously, I was still alone. That one spooked me a little. My parents bought at this point, 110-year-old house about 10 years ago, and it feels everybody but me has had a paranormal experience in the house. My parents said they've seen a short, kind of chubby ginger kid appear at random spots in the house. Sometimes just standing in the washer-dryer room and vanishing. Sometimes they'd see him at the top of the stairs and he'd walk towards my room, hooray, and disappear. Eventually, my parents were tired of it, so they had my grandfather, very Christian guy, come and bless the house, and the appearances stopped. My brother has talked about staying up late at night and hearing someone walk up the stairs. They're very old, so they are very squeaky. Walk to his closed door, jiggle the doorknob, original doors, so there was a quarter turn of play in the knobs, a bunch, stop, and walk back down the steps and stop. Didn't hear a door open or close. They just stopped at the bottom of the steps. My mom has also described seeing something peek out from around the corner at her as she's sitting watching TV at night. She thinks it's probably just her slowly falling asleep and seeing things, but it's still unsettling for her. There was a period of time where the mudroom door would kind of flex randomly, like a change of air pressure. This usually happens whenever someone opens an outside door and closes it, but nobody ever was near a door, or the doors were locked. Probably just some weird phenomena caused by an old house, but still creepy. And yet, here I am, who probably spent the most time up and alone in the middle of the night in that house, not seeing or hearing anything that wasn't explainable, from night terrors and sleep paralysis, which I've always had at multiple houses. In a basement apartment when I was in grad school, the landlady lived in the main house, and while she herself was super nice and cool, Her house always felt really off to me. However, she charged a reasonable amount of rent and I was only 2 miles from school. About a week or two after I moved in, I had gone to bed and the apartment was pitch black at night. If my landlady ever wanted to speak to me, I would hear the doors above the stairs unlock and she would call out to me. One night, I heard movement on the steps, but I didn't hear her unlock the doors and it was probably 2 a.m. She certainly didn't call me saying she needed to talk to me. I hear these heavy steps descending the stairs, but I'm so scared that I shrink further in my bed to hide. The floor begins to creak towards my door and then nothing for a few seconds. I'm not sure if it is safe to relax and go back to bed. Then I hear the door knob start to turn. My fear makes me so scared that I pull the covers over my head to hide. I prayed the whole time under the covers. The next thing I know, it's finally morning. I stayed in that apartment for 2 years. When it was my graduation, I slept in a hotel because there was no room for my family to sleep. That night in the hotel was the first restful sleep I had in what felt like forever. My friend Carl's last apartment had 2 ghosts. One was a little girl who would play with your hair while you were hanging out in the living room, as well as running along the vertical blinds, making them swing back and forth. The second I never saw or heard, but I did feel him. One night, I locked myself out of my apartment. We lived in the same complex, 1 building over from each other, so I asked to crash at Carl's place for the night while he went to work. But he had told me, don't go into his room. There is a male ghost who will tell you that you don't belong in there. His previous roommate had let several friends crash in his room, and a tall black shadow opened the door and said get out to all of them. Freaked him the hell out. So here I am on the couch in the living room, head on the end of the couch that looks down the hall to the bedrooms and bathroom. I swear I was being watched. Then it hit me. I needed to pee. And the bathroom is right across the hall from Carl's bedroom. Fantastic. So I slowly creeped down the hall, and about 5 feet from my goal, I said, hey man, I just need to use the bathroom. Then it felt like a cloud of energy got pulled back into my bedroom, despite the door being closed. So I did my thing and hauled ass back to the couch, but I put my head on the other end of the couch. Nothing outstanding, but just a really creepy vibe. On the positive side, at least Carl had someone looking out for him. Growing up, I used to live in a fairly large 2-story house. I'm pretty sure it was built in the early 1900s because when we moved in during the mid-90s, and Dad told me it was 100 years old at that point. It was a really cool house with a huge backyard, but there were some really creepy parts. The basement, of course, was dark, unfinished, and had 2 small rooms facing each other. One of the rooms was creepy. It had these weird dividers on the floor made of plywood, kind of how you would imagine stalls in a horse stable, but on a much smaller scale. On the landing heading to the 2nd floor was a big door about halfway up the wall that led to an attic space. The door wasn't attached in any way, it was just leaned up against the jamb. The attic was creepy because of the walls were newspaper clippings of people with their eyes scratched out, like that is some super cliche horror movie thing, but seeing it in real life was spooky. There were always a lot of weird noises in that house. It was old, so it's to be expected. We would hear creaks and knocks, sometimes the occasional bang, but we would rarely see anything really strange. It didn't seem like a haunted house at all. That is until one day, my younger brother and my cousin were playing with a webcam, making a video on Windows Movie Maker. In the video, my brother starts adjusting the camera, and as soon as he moves his hand away, you can very clearly see something moving behind them, which quickly ducks behind them and disappears. My brother didn't notice, but my cousin did. He quickly turned around to check, but didn't see anything. We watched that video over and over, and I eventually noticed that you can see whatever it is actually materialize while my brother is moving the camera around. Whatever it was looked kind of like the head of a bat, but about the size of a fist. I've seen and heard a lot of weird things aside from that, but that was the only real experience from that creepy-ass house. Apart from specters appearing at random intervals, the most chilling was the night before Christmas. For background, the spirit in our home had proved to be very possessive of me and kept attempting to keep me from my boyfriend and win my attention, maybe affection. Every night, when he would be working into the wee hours, I fell asleep in our room with the bedroom door unlocked to grant him easy access. Every night when he got home, it was firmly locked. I heard him calling for me in other rooms while showering and would emerge to find the house always empty and BF at the gas station or in the backyard. It would sit next to me on the bed, appear to me while bathing, rap on the wall while I was alone, always after my attention. My then boyfriend was deployed, and I was just starting on a glass of wine, settling onto the living room couch. We had decorated right before he left, but I was lonely and hadn't heard from him in a day or two. A few tears slipped, and I heard a sound. No branch had moved. There was no breeze or fan, but a glass ball had gently dropped from the tree onto the wood floor without breaking. I stared at it, and it stayed in place for a second under the tree. Then it slowly rolled 4 feet in my direction over the lip of a thick, heavy rug, which shouldn't have been possible, and stopped directly in front of my feet. The first of many gifts to cheer me up. I received a vintage children's card, a queen of spades with torn edges, and yellowed paper shortly after. I don't know where it came from. It appeared one day, and when I would throw it out, it would appear somewhere else. The garage, the windowsill, under the bed. One time, my boyfriend threw it out, as if in angry retaliation. When I was in the bath that evening, the spirit of a woman sat on my chest, pressing me into the water. I couldn't move. It was like a night terror, but with risk of drowning. She had such a twisted, hateful face. After a moment of clawing at the sides of the tub, I was released. We sold the house earlier this year and moved across the country. We found out that the previous owner had been a depressed, manic hoarder who kept animals she seemingly abused in her home. I don't know what had happened to her, if it's guaranteed she died in the house or what, but the spirit that dwelled there was the unhappiest thing I'd ever encountered. I almost feel sorry for it. I lived in this big pre-war building in New York City, and every night after I put my daughter to sleep in her room, I would lay in my bed and watch TV. The way my bed was angled, I could see a sliver of the hallway out of the corner of my eye. I would always see this tall shadow pass by the door, and it would jar me. I would always look over, but see nothing after that. After a few years, I got so used to it, I didn't even flinch anymore. In fact, I had honestly started to believe I just had some sort of vision problem that caused me to see the shadow in my peripheral vision. Eventually, we moved out. But a week before we did, my daughter and I were just hanging out in my bed one night watching TV. All our boxes were pretty much packed. The whole apartment was ready to go. I was laying on the bed in my usual spot, and my daughter was laying at the foot of the bed playing with her dolls. Again, my vision problem acted up, and I saw the shadow out of the corner of my eye. I didn't flinch or look over. I hadn't in years. I was so used to it. But all of a sudden, my 8-year-old child goes, "Who was that?" Holy fuck. I jumped up out of the bed. "You saw that?"